passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, everybody. Josh Brown here, and happy early 4th of July. It is Thursday, July 3rd, and I am gearing up to get out of town with my family, enjoy some nice quality family time. And so in lieu of an episode today, I'm actually going to play you a recent interview where I was interviewed by another fellow attorney who has a great podcast called Legal Marketing Made Easy, and he focuses on that for attorneys and law firms and sort of highlights attorneys that are doing things in marketing that's unique, different, and effective. And through this interview, I think you'll get some really good insight on my background and how I got to be an attorney and doing what I'm doing. And I think you'll learn some things in terms of how I'm doing marketing and things with my podcast and social media that you can certainly apply to your businesses, and always thinking maybe a little bit outside the box. And I think that can certainly provide some great advantages for you and differentiate you from the pack. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this interview, and I look forward to having another regular episode on Tuesday.
Josh, hi. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Jim, how are you doing?
Doing great. So today's guest is Josh Brown, a franchise and entrepreneur attorney from Indiana and host and creator of Franchise Euphoria, the top-rated franchise podcast on iTunes. Josh helps entrepreneurs turn their creativity into real businesses and their businesses into franchises. He also serves as outside counsel for tech entrepreneurs and helps people to buy franchises the right way. So, Josh, I want to thank you real quick for being on the podcast today. So why don't you go ahead and just give a brief introduction of you and your law practice and what you're doing right now.
Well, yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoy your podcast. I love what you're doing, and it's been great just getting to know you. But yeah, I'm a practicing attorney, an entrepreneur in Indiana. I've been licensed since 2006 was when I graduated law school. So practicing a little over 8 years now. And really, it was kind of interesting when I graduated law school. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. You know, I'd sort of fallen into the I call it the trap, really, of, thinking, okay, you got to go work for, a big firm. And I really thought I'd go work for a big firm, work up to partner, and, live happily ever after. And what I realized was that's really kind of the path I took. But along that way, I was miserable. I mean, I really didn't enjoy what I was doing. And I'm one of those non-traditional law students. So, I mean, between undergrad and law school, I worked for 5 years in business management. And one of the things I did was I worked and helped two different franchise owner-operators start and grow their business here locally. And so as I was in the midst of working at a firm doing commercial litigation, insurance defense type work, which I just hated. I was like, God, what can I do? I mean, I got to do something. And I started thinking about all my experiences and everything that I enjoyed doing. I thought, I really want to work with small businesses. I mean, I really like working with entrepreneurs. I like getting to know my clients. I like getting to know small business owners. They're sort of the engine that makes the economy go round and round. But then I thought, God, I don't want to be just some other small business attorney. It's like, hey, I'm a small business attorney. Okay, you and 1,000 other people. So I thought, how can I really niche myself? And that's what led me to franchising. I thought, well, I know about franchising from a business perspective, but I don't know anything about it from a legal perspective. So I started doing research, and this was maybe I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and started realizing, holy cow, there's a lot of interesting issues in franchising, and there's not a lot of attorneys that are marketing themselves that way. They're sort of franchising is part of sort of a corporate practice, but you don't really see a lot of law firms or attorneys, at least in Indiana or some of the surrounding states, marketing themselves that way. And I said to myself, and this will be good, Jim, for the legal marketing part of it. I said, you know what? The next cocktail party I go to, I'm just going to introduce myself as a franchise attorney. So I did that, and it was amazing, the response. And ever since, it's been amazing, the response. When I said, hey, the difference between saying, hey, I'm a franchise attorney versus saying I'm a small business attorney, every single person says one of two things. Really, that's so fascinating. I want to hear more about that because I thought about buying a franchise at some time. Or, hey, I need to introduce you to so-and-so because they've got a business that they want to turn into a franchise or that they own a franchise. I started realizing myself, man, this has some stickiness to it. And then I started getting people who I would meet at these networking events and cocktail parties 2, 3, 4 months later after I met them the first time will send me an email that says, hey, Josh, hope all's going well. Was thinking of you when I got this. And it would be something relating to franchising. And I thought, man, from a marketing perspective, this is great. and so that's really what got me into franchising. And I slowly but surely started building up my own practice, and I was working at other law firms, and just really wanted to do it my own way. As you and I have discussed off the air, I mean, I do a lot of stuff with technology. I've got my own podcast, my blog. I'm very active in the digital space. And in the law firms I was with, that was sort of foreign territory for them. And I really wanted to do it my own way. And so about a little over a year ago, I launched my own practice, despite the fact that for probably the last 3+ years, I've had all my own clients, just was working within the confines of another law firm.
Well, Josh, that's fantastic. And Lawyer Nation, one thing I want you to really listen and maybe rewind and listen to what Josh said there is so important, is how he has branded himself as a franchise lawyer, not just another corporate and small business lawyer, which is what so many lawyers do. And there's just a dime a dozen out there. But I bet you if you did a Google search in your jurisdiction, looked up franchise lawyers, there's probably not that many. I think that was just a brilliant move from a marketing perspective, Josh, and I really appreciate you sharing that and commend you for going that way, because I know it's not always easy to niche yourself in that way. Before we move forward and talk more about your journey and how you got to where you are today, although you've given a pretty good introduction into that, do you have an inspirational quote you can share with our listeners today?
Yeah, I mean, I love good quotes. I know many good quotes, but I'd say the one that's been most inspirational to me is Steve Jobs, who said, "The journey is the reward." And really, I live by that every single day. I mean, I think it's really easy as attorneys, as entrepreneurs, as business people, to always be chasing the solution, and I got, if only, just when I get there, I'm close. No, the journey is the reward. I mean, if you're doing what lights you up, what sets you on fire, if you're doing what you're good at, and if you're doing it in a way where you've got an economic model to make money up by doing it, you've got a business, and your journey really is the reward. If you're not doing that, then you're living in probably hell. I mean, you're probably on a path that's not right for you. But what I love about that quote and its simplicity is that it's so true, and it's such a great measure to ask yourself, hey, do I enjoy what I do? Am I enjoying going through this process? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably on a good path. And if the answer is no, then maybe you should think about doing something differently. I mean, I also think it was Steve Jobs who said, I don't know if it was in an interview or in one of his speeches or something, where he said, he always, if he had too many days in a row where he wasn't finding enjoyment with what he did, he would really stop and think, well, why am I doing this? And I need to make some changes. And so I think I think too many people don't do that. Don't take that introspective kind of look at what they're doing and how they're living and where they're going with their life and business.
That's a great quote, and I have to remember back when, and I want to talk to you about this too, because you may have had a similar experience, but I remember way back in 2005 when I had made the decision to start my own law practice long before that. But in 2005, I was working at a medical malpractice firm doing defense of hospitals, and I remember my job as a lowly associate there was basically to take stacks and stacks of deposition transcripts and transcribe them into indexes so that the attorney that was theoretically trying the cases could have like a summary of the transcript in anticipation of trial. And it was probably the most, just boring, mind-numbing work you could possibly imagine. And that was not rewarding to me. So when I think about the journey as the reward, for me, that was kind of the tipping point for me to start my own practice. And I gave my notice shortly thereafter. So I appreciate that quote, Josh.
Well, think about this, Jim, real quick before we go on to the next question. I mean, I think it's careerbliss.com. I saw a statistic on there that said the number one unhappiest job in America is that of an associate attorney. I mean, despite the fact that the average pay, I think on their site, they said the average pay was $111,000. It's the number one unhappiest job. Now, think about how sad is that? How sad is that I don't know about you or any of the listeners, but I know for myself, I paid for my law. I'm still paying for my law school. I graduated law school, 6-figure debt, and I'm paying that bad boy back, right? So, and I love it. I loved my law school. In fact, I'm going back there to speak, and I love it. I mean, it's given me so many opportunities. But I didn't go to law school to then put myself as one of the unhappiest positions. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, I'm not wired that way. But you're exactly right. I mean, so many people are currently experiencing what you've experienced, what I've experienced, and they're just stuck there. And boy, what a lonely and in my mind, sad place to be. And it just doesn't have to be that way.
No, and there's so much fear that goes into starting your own practice, and if people can really just understand that it will be okay, and that's really why I created this podcast, is to kind of share these stories of attorneys like you and some of my other past guests who have made that leap from law firm to solo practice and maybe now have bigger practices that they are kind of in charge of, and how they have done it successfully. And so, Lawyer Nation, if you're out there and you're sitting at your desk at your law firm where you're an associate and you're listening to this podcast, maybe with your iBuds on and your earbuds in and trying to think about whether or not you should give your notice, you can do it. You can start your law practice and you can be successful. So, well, let's get into some of the things I want to talk to you about today here, Josh. And I really want to dig a little bit deeper. You gave a good overview of how you got from law school to the law firm job you were at to starting your own practice. But why don't we get a little deeper here and really talk about how it was that you were at that firm, you didn't enjoy it, and how it was that you actually made that decision to go about starting your own law practice.
Well, actually, I was at several firms, and they were all. So when I graduated, I worked for a medium to large firm, probably on the larger side for Indiana, and while working there, I was doing insurance defense, worked with great attorneys, never really found satisfaction with it. And then I had an opportunity, literally got a call from an appellate judge or one of the appellate judge's clerks that said, hey, there's an opening and the judge wants to interview you to come and be a clerk. I mean, through law school, I had done, law review and had done moot court and had argued a case, this unique situation where I argued a case before the Indiana Supreme Court right after I graduated law school, even before I had taken the bar exam. And so I got a call to basically go be a clerk for an appellate judge. So I did that. And then and that was an amazing experience. The judge has become a friend and what a great experience. It's not something I'd want to do for my career, but it was such great insight into into the court and getting to know a lot of judges. But from that, I went to a firm, and this was back when the economy kind of started tanking for attorneys. But I had an opportunity to go to a firm that was really doing work that I didn't really have any experience in, but it was litigation based. And they had hired me. And I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding because I thought I was going to go in and work with sort of a litigation team. And then when I got there, it was sort of like I was the litigation team, and I didn't really have that much.
That happens all the time, doesn't it?
I didn't really have much experience. Then we got in, and I just really didn't really like what I was doing. I didn't like the atmosphere of the firm, and there were some internal things going on, and I decided very quickly I got to look for something else. But rather than acting quickly, I just stuck with it, and slowly over time my work deteriorated and my relationships there deteriorated to the point where they fired me. I was in the process of leaving anyways, but and it was absolutely demoralizing. I've never been fired from anything in my life, and looking back on it now, though, it was probably the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And then from there, I went to work at another law firm and got some great experience, and then decided to essentially launch out on my own. But this was not. I don't want to paint a rosy picture of it's been just sort of a smooth sailing all the way through. I mean, looking back now that I have my own practice, I realize that if I look back at everything, I should have started my own practice a long time ago. But part of the reason I didn't was I was fearful. I was scared. I have a family. I've got 2 kids. I've got a wife, and I'm supporting all of them. But yet, every time I was in a situation where I was flourishing, and each place I've been went well, I kind of checked out myself. And because I didn't like the environment, I didn't like the way they were doing things, I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to be able to go out and do things and market myself a different way. And it was always I always felt like I was working in an environment with strangers from the perspective of we thought so differently. And for several years, I thought it was me. What's wrong with me? Why am I not? Now I realize that, I just should have been doing it on my own. I mean, I just more of the entrepreneurial kind of mindset, and that's great. It just took me a few years to figure that out, and a few bumpy roads to go over to finally get there. But there's definitely been challenges along the way. But as they say, it's never really a failure until you're out of the game, right? I mean, all these things are just learning lessons and opportunities to then get into a practice or get into something that you enjoy better. So I guess on the one hand, one of my strengths or weaknesses, depending on how you look at it, is I'm not very patient, and I'm not very good at just sucking it up and being in a place or being at a firm or doing something that I'm not happy with, or that I don't find passion in, or I don't, get charged up to do it. That, to me, I'm just not wired that way. And thank goodness for me, I finally figured that out. And now I'm in a position where I don't have to deal with those kinds of things.
Well, Josh, I want to dig a little bit deeper there. I want to go back to that moment and see if you can remember this when you were at that firm, and not the firm you got fired from, the firm after that. And so at that point, how long ago was that?
Well, that would have been 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, so so you were married, and did you have 2 kids then?
So when I have a 5-year-old daughter, okay, and then I have a 4-month-old. So no, I didn't have my second.
Okay,
daughter.
So your wife might have been pregnant then, or
yes,
close to it. Yeah. So I want to go back to that moment. So when you were at that firm and you finally made that decision to give your notice and start your own practice, can you take us back to then and talk a little bit about how you made that decision and and what happened in that day?
Well, so what happened was, I worked for a great attorney in a great practice where he was basically he had a really large insurance conglomerate, a set of 3 or 4 different companies, and he did a bunch of work for them. And I was traveling all around, but I knew I didn't want to do that kind of work. So I was also in a position, because it was a small firm, to really start building up my own clients. So I had sort of put together in my mind, okay, I'm going to try to build up my own clients and see where this goes. So I started doing that, and slowly but surely I started getting a client here, a client there, started getting people who were reaching out to me more from whether it was people who I knew from the community or whatnot. And I started to build up additional clients. And the attorney, one of the things that he allowed me to do was he incentivized me to do that by giving me a piece of everything that I brought in addition to the salary that he was paying me. Very, very generous attorney. But for me, the biggest struggles and the biggest stress was making that decision. Can I do it on my own? Am I confident enough? Do I have that ability to really sustain this? Will these people come with me? I wasn't too concerned about his reaction. Now, a lot of people might, because ultimately when I told him I was going to leave and do my own thing, he was very supportive of that. And he kind of said, yeah, I think that's a great thing for you. I think that'll be great. And in fact, we now share office space. So the same.
How about that?
Yeah. So, and it's a great relationship. I know everybody in the office. But there's one thing I want to mention that I kind of glazed over, and that is when I decided to leave, and I told the attorney, I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to start my own firm. I'd like to share space with you, and here's what we do. And he said, okay, that's great. I then went on a trip with my family, and I started getting scared. I started getting the sort of the second guesses and the cold feet. I remember we went on a trip to Vancouver, and at that point in time, there was another law firm in town that had expressed an interest in me potentially coming over there and bringing sort of my small little practice and being of counsel and just doing what I do over there and just working with my own clients. So after having decided that I was going to go launch on my own, I backtracked and actually went to another firm for a short period of time, and then officially went out on my own. So I made so think about this. So I'm sitting there, I decide I'm going to go out on my own, I decide I'm leaving, and then after I put everything in motion, I just kind of was like, whoa, got really, really nervous. And when this opportunity came up to go be of counsel at another firm with my own practice, I jumped on it and I did that instead for about a 8 or 9 month period of time. And then I finally launched my own firm. I was working with all my own clients at that firm, and I was increasing the number of clients that I had, and I had been active in my blog and doing all those sorts of things. And then really that gave me the true confidence at that time to say, okay, I can do this.
So let me make sure I understand that right. So then, so you were working at this next firm for 8 or 9 months, and at that time you're building up your client base. And so by the time you actually did decide, okay, yes, now is the time I'm going to leave, you actually had some established client relationships, and you had people to take with you as kind of a client base.
Yeah, when I went to the last firm that I was at, and I had told them this. I had said, look, I'm planning on opening up my own shop. And they said, oh yeah, that's fine, but here's an opportunity. We could probably work out something here if you were interested. And I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And they were gung-ho about it. And the truth is, when I started, the first 6-7 months, it was awesome in terms of, they were already talking about making me a partner and everything was going great. But just as what had happened at my other stops along the way, I got disenchanted. I started losing interest because I just didn't like how I was limited in certain capacities. I wanted to do something, but I had to go through, and get permission to do this and do that. And I started, getting
It wasn't your thing.
It wasn't my thing. And so, but what was great about this last stop, and this ties into your question as well, is they actually came to me before I went to them. I was thinking for at least a month or so, how am I going to tell these people that I'm leaving? Without, I mean, I really like them. I know they like me. They came to me, the managing partner, and said, hey, listen, we can just tell you're not happy anymore. Like you're like a different person, and we just want to tell you that if you want to go and do your own thing as you had originally planned on doing, that's fine. We'll support you in that. We don't want you to feel like, we don't want you to be unhappy, because obviously that's not a good fit here and it's not a good for you. And in that moment I said, gosh, yeah, I don't want to be here. I mean, I want to be doing my own thing. I've been wanting to do it for months. They go, oh yeah, we can tell. So think about that. That's amazing how they handled it, in my opinion. So that freed me up to then just go, okay. And they were great. It was like, well, how much time do you want? Do you want to take some time to get everything set up? And I think it was over the course of the next 2 months where I just basically set up my own firm. And then my wife had said, when I was looking at space, I'd actually put a deposit down on an office space. My wife said, why don't you go approach, Steve is who I used to work with, and see if he's wants to share space with you. Because then, you'll know people over there and it won't be so lonely. And I go, yeah, I feel like I already, went over that bridge. I don't know if he'll be interested. She's like, well, hey, Josh, don't be an idiot. Just go ask. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So I did. I went over and I asked Steve, and I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. And I was like, I'd love to share space with you. And he's like, oh yeah, I would love that. Come on. So that's how the whole thing went down.
All right. Well, I'm sure you've had a lot of ups and downs along the journey that you've had, and maybe can you think of a story of a failure that you've experienced during your journey and kind of what you learned from it?
Well, I think the biggest failure to me was, I think is failure getting fired. I think that's the biggest failure that I've ever experienced, even though it's led to great things for me now. But in terms of, there's been so many failures I've had, but I don't really think of them as failures. I've done, if you're looking at my practice right now, right, in the first 6 months of my practice, I probably spent $10,000 or $15,000 on things that I shouldn't have ever spent money on. So I consider those, to be failures.
Can you give some examples?
Well, on certain technology stuff where I think I got stuck in the trap early on because I was so gung ho about technology. Look, these are great products, but I've used products like, HubSpot and some of these others where I realized that where I was in the process, it just wasn't a good fit for me, and it was very, very expensive, and I didn't get much value from them. And I got caught in the trap of trying to have technology sort of be the ultimate solution. And really, technology can be a great tool to open up new doors, but you've already got to have sort of a very clear picture, and you have to have some things already in place to really leverage that. I tried to use I'll tell you a failure. I tried to use a company, and it's funny. They're a company called EA Help, and they do virtual assistants. And that was my first.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
And I know Michael Hyatt's a big fan of theirs, and and actually that's where I had heard of them. So I contacted them, and I worked with their virtual assistants for several months, and absolutely got no value from it. Now, their relationship manager they have there, who's still there, was fantastic and did a great job trying to make everything work. But the idea was you're going to get a virtual assistant who has experience and who can come right in. And that was not my experience. They were very, very nice virtual assistants, but I ended up having to essentially pay them to train them as well. And that experience cost me $5,000-$6,000 where I got virtually no value from it. But so I was very, very hesitant after that to pull the trigger and hire another virtual assistant. I have done that, and I'm very happy with who I have now, but I didn't go through one of those almost like
services
to do it. So
well, I think that's a great example. And sometimes you just don't learn. And this is, again, for those of you listening at home, this is a great example of how you don't always learn what you don't know until you try it. And you wouldn't have known that experience until you tried it. And it's not that there was some cost associated with that, and that's not to say that EA Help, is that what it was, wouldn't work for other people. It's just that you had a bad situation with it. But
yeah, every situation is different, and you got to have part of the things. And here's a great lesson for people, especially the other attorneys who are maybe considering virtual assistants, because it can be such a cost-effective tool. Is I went in thinking that I was going to get a virtual assistant who could then help me systemize things. And what I realized was it's hard to do that, right? So you have to have almost a very clear picture of what you want to use your virtual assistant for before you hire them. Because if you don't, it's going to be very, very challenging to feel like you're getting great value. And just like with any kind of independent contractor or employee or anything, it's almost like you have to have a job description, and you're not going to find, or it's very difficult to find, one assistant that can do everything. Just like with attorneys, just like with anybody in any profession, you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses. And so what I've learned is you have to sort of have an idea and say, okay, this is what I'm looking for you to do. And are you able to do that for me? And my first experience with VAs, I was almost looking for them to come in and me say, okay, here's what my practice is all about. Here's what I do. How can you help me? And it was sort of like, well, I don't know. So
yeah. And there's a great book on that subject, Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker. It was just released a couple months ago. I don't know if you've read it. I have. It's a great book. And he echoes exactly what you're saying right now. Now, Chris Ducker operates a virtual staff finder agency out of the Philippines, but so most of his virtual help comes from overseas, but there are other places in America, and the book kind of transcends that. It's a basic guideline for how to find a good virtual assistant if that's something you're looking to do.
Yeah, I like Chris very much, and actually his book is on my to-do list in terms of reading. I haven't read it yet, but I like Chris very much. He's got a real good business. I've talked to him several times about utilizing his service. I didn't end up doing that because I found somebody else who's worked out really, really well here in the States. But yeah, he was one of the people that talked to me about that and said, hey, you can't expect to hire a VA and have them do everything. Because it's not going to happen. You're not going to be happy. But B, you kind of have to have a very, very clear picture of what you want them to do in order to get the most value from them.
That's right. So, well, that is a fantastic story of failure. Let's flip it around for a minute and let's talk about a light bulb moment, and let's talk about something, maybe a moment you had where you really started to quote unquote get the practice or the business of having a law practice and really started to find your groove. Can you think back and share a moment where that would have happened?
Yeah, I mean it really came about probably 4 to 5 months into me launching my own firm, right? So I had the aha moment of wanting to focus on franchising back when I was working for another law firm, as we discussed. So that's obviously an aha light bulb moment. And I had that sort of thought solidified when I started telling people about it, and people started, it was really resonating with people, and people were referring potential clients and referrals over to me. So that was a sort of an aha moment. But the bigger aha moment for me, after I got over, and this will probably resonate with you, Jim, when you first launch your own practice, I mean, I barely slept. I was so nervous about oh my God, what if the phone doesn't ring? Yeah, I've got this work now, but what about when it dries up? Is there going to be more stuff coming? It took me about 4 or 5 months to really get comfortable. Not that I don't think about that, but I really got comfortable with the idea that, yeah, I mean, you do a good job for people, you do, and the work is there. But the aha moment was I realized that the way that I was and have been strategizing in terms of my marketing for my practice and my blog, Indie Franchise Law, my Franchise Euphoria podcast, and everything that I was doing and tying in my online presence and involvement and engagement with my offline networking, along with having a really niche practice, was the secret sauce to my success. Because every time I would stray outside of it, and every time somebody would call and say, hey, can you help me with this? And I knew it was outside of exactly what I wanted to focus on, and I did it. I always regretted it, but then the big moment to me was when I kind of saw everything work well. So it was right at that time, probably like 4 or 5 months in, where I started seeing, wow, I'm really starting to get some traction in the online space through my blog and everything. And I really started seeing the possibility of, boy, God, I should add a podcast to this, and that would just be really cool. It could leverage my expertise, and it could tie in perfectly to my law practice. But always with the idea that at the end of the day, people do business with people they know, like, and trust, and that's no different online. So you always have to leverage the online with what you're doing offline. So I'm really involved with local networking and the chambers of commerce and other kinds of things, sort of feet on the ground kind of stuff. And I combine the online with the offline, and having a very, very particular specific niche. And that's sort of been my secret sauce.
That's really great advice. And I think what a lot of lawyers do is they maybe combine one or two of those things, but I think the fact that you've combined 3 of those things together, that I can totally see how powerful that would be for you, and with such a great niche that, and it just really, helps you position yourself as, the go-to person for franchise law in your area, because wherever anyone's going to be looking, they're going to see you, because number one, you're probably one of the only lawyers that's doing that type of law. And then, when they go to chamber meetings, what you talk about and what you project during, your networking meetings is the same as what people are going to find if they go online to look for you, I would guess.
Yeah, and here's one thing that's happened to me as well that I could not have anticipated. But, when you do things differently, when you do things from your sort of, your true authentic self, and it's just me. I mean, I'm just me, and I practice law. I'm I'm not one of those confrontational type people. I'm very optimistic. And so just by being that way, I mean, I'm just different from a lot of attorneys. But what I hear from my clients over and over again is one of the reasons they like working with me is that they know I'm up to speed with what's going on the digital side of things and online, and that I'm progressive. And they really like that as small business entrepreneurs. They want to know that their attorney is not somebody who's behind the times from that perspective. And that's something I could have never anticipated, but I've had several clients tell me that. And I thought, wow, that's one of those unanticipated things that just is kind of like, well, that's kind of cool, because I never even thought about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, that's really cool. So, Josh, let's get into kind of the final segment today, which is the final 5 questions I'm going to ask you. And this is just quick questions with quick answers. Are you ready to go?
Yep.
All right. So the first question I have for you is, what was holding you back from starting your own law firm?
Fear of failure.
What is the best business advice that you have ever received?
The best business advice was from, I believe it was my dad, who basically said, hey, what's the worst thing that can happen? You go work for another crappy law firm? Joking, not saying that they were crappy, but in other words, you're miserable at another law firm. That's not so bad.
That's great. That's great business advice. And for lawyers out there, for you listening at home, the worst thing that can happen if you do start a solo practice is, you don't make it and you go back to work for somebody else. That's the nice thing about having a law license.
And you'll be better.
We've got a skill.
You'll be better by having
absolutely.
that experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, can you share a personal habit that you believe contributes to your success?
Yeah, I'm tenacious from this perspective of that. A personal habit of mine is that I am very inquisitive, and I'm very open to meeting and talking and getting involved in different things and meeting different people. And that might sound like, maybe I don't know if you're looking for like, oh, I do this every single day, but I will tell you, the one thing that has done so much for me is just actually being interested in other people. That's a personal habit of mine as well. When I'm talking to people, when I'm engaging with people, I'm always interested in what they're doing. And I think that comes just naturally to me, but I think that also resonates really well with other people, and so that's been a huge part of my success, because by being interested in other people, I learn a lot about them.
What one or two internet tools or resources do you use in your law practice that you would recommend to our listeners?
Boy, that's a hard question, because as you and I've talked, we use a lot of tools. So I'll tell you one tool that I love, Ruby Receptionist, and that's the virtual receptionist company, callruby.com, based out of Oregon. So I never answer my phones, and that's been huge. I'd say the other tool that I'm really starting to like a lot and really getting used to is Salesforce.com, and here's why. It's a practice management tool, but even better than that, and I think better than all the other legal practice management tools out there, because I've tried all of them. I've tried Clio, Rocket Matter, MyCase, you name it, I bet you I've tried it. Here's what those lack that Salesforce doesn't lack: lead capturing. So you can basically, I'm out, I go to a lot of different events, I meet a lot of people, get business cards, you talk to somebody. Salesforce has a great ability, if you go back into it, and you can capture conversations and be able to set up follow-ups for all those prospects and leads and referral partners. And in my opinion, a lot of solo and small firm lawyers miss out on opportunities because you can't keep up with all that. You can't keep up with all of it in your head or writing it down on a notepad and managing your day-to-day practice. So Salesforce has a great combination of being able to help you manage leads and follow up and prospects, but also manage your day-to-day practice.
And I know this is we're going through quick segments here, but I do want to ask you a couple quick follow-ups. And first, before I do that, I just want to mention to you at home that Ruby Receptionist is one of our preferred vendors. And if you go to www.callruby.com/LMME, you can get a 2-week free trial of Ruby Receptionist. They will waive the activation fee as well if you choose to go ahead and use them. So I use Ruby Receptionist. I've used them for almost 4 years. I love them, so I totally agree with you on that. Now, I want to ask you about Salesforce, because as you know, you listen to my podcast, and I've talked about this before. I use Infusionsoft and in combination with MyCase. And I use Infusionsoft primarily for my back-end marketing, to automate my marketing. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you kind of use Salesforce as kind of both those tools in one. Is that right?
Yes.
And so why did you choose to use Salesforce versus can you go a little bit more into it? Because I know you've said you've experimented with Infusionsoft as well. Why'd you settle on Salesforce?
I settled on Salesforce because to me it's a lot more intuitive. I used Infusionsoft for several months, and here's what I think about Infusionsoft. I think it's a powerful tool. I know a lot of people who have found great success with it. I happen to believe that to get the biggest bang for your buck with Infusionsoft, you have to already have certain products or that you already want to put out there. And you almost have to have somebody dedicated to help you set that thing up on a consistent basis. I mean, it is in my opinion, it's a very confusing product. And I didn't like the way, first of all, I didn't have that extra person who could dedicate all that time to it. I got very frustrated trying to set it up myself. And I didn't feel like I was at a point where I really needed it. I mean, I use Aweber, which I love. Aweber, MailChimp, there's another one that's great called GetResponse, but I use those right now as sort of lead capture follow-ups. And I know there's another attorney who I know really well, Rachel Rogers. She loves Infusionsoft. I know a lot of people like yourself love it. For me, I don't know what it was. I think I just got frustrated with it. But what Salesforce does that's different is I think it's a much easier interface that's more intuitive. And I think for the way in which my practice is built, I think it's got the ability, as I said, to be more of like a practice management, day in, day out practice management tool, as well as helping me with not just the capturing of email leads and stuff like that, but the follow up with it. And I found it very challenging to have sort of the same automated follow-ups with prospects and stuff like that. Like I totally get the whole long tail lead generation and all that stuff. But what I wanted more of was I go out and meet with so-and-so, put his information in, put, a reminder, be able to build up an entire file on somebody. And Salesforce just seemed to be a little bit of a better solution. I think Infusionsoft is really good. I think it just depends on the person, the practice, and how far you are into that. I mean, I had a number of people who told me that with Infusionsoft, you'll get your biggest bang for your buck if you already have a list of 10,000 people on your list, and you have products that are already put together, and you just want to automate a lot of that. Well, I didn't have that. And so I just didn't find as much value with it.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's see. So what book would you recommend to someone who's starting a law firm?
Boy, the number one book for me, because when you're starting a law firm, you're also becoming an entrepreneur, whether you like it or not, would be the E-Myth Revisited. I had the chance to interview Michael Gerber on my podcast, and that was sort of a dream interview for me because his book was so instructive for me on how you build a business so that the business doesn't run you, but you run the business. And I think that there is an E-Myth for attorneys, which is fine. You get that too. I like E-Myth, the regular E-Myth Revisited, a little bit better, where he walks through basically Sarah and her pie shop, and he's a big proponent of the franchising model and thinking of your business as though you're going to replicate it 5,000 times. And here's the thing. Even if you're not going to replicate your law practice, which you're probably not 5,000 times, if you think in those terms and think in terms of setting up systems and processes, you're going to have a much more efficient law firm, and you're going to have likely a much more profitable law firm long term. So I think that's a great book for an attorney to read before they set up their practice.
And would you be surprised to know that you were not the first person to recommend that book on the podcast? That's a great book. I love that book. I've had it on my shelf for many years. All right, final question here, and then we'll call it a wrap. So if you had to start over from scratch with everything that you know today, but nothing but a laptop, your law license, and $500, what would you do in your first week?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So what I would do is I would immediately buy a URL from GoDaddy or one of those two, for $10-12. I'd go check out Michael Hyatt's, how to set up a WordPress site in 20 minutes. And I'd set up a blog. And I'd just get that going. I'd pick a really specific area that I was interested in. And with the rest of the money, I would go out into the local community and try to find one or two key players, take them out to coffee, take them out to dinner, take them out to drinks, whatever. And I would get very, very clear on what it is I'm doing and try to leverage what they're doing and their contacts within the community to then have them introduce me to other people.
Awesome. Well, Josh, I think that's a great answer, and that's a great place to end the interview today. So I really appreciate your time, and before we go, I almost forgot. Can you give our listeners kind of your contact information and tell them where they can reach out to find you if they are so inclined?
Sure. So you can reach me at Josh at Indy, INDY, franchiselaw.com. So indyfranchiselaw.com. That's also my website and blog. I've also got a podcast called Franchise Euphoria that you can check out on iTunes or on my website. And if you're old school, you can call me. My number's 317-688-9111. And but yeah, I mean, I'd love to, anybody who's got questions or anybody who just wants to chat or introduce yourself. First of all, I love meeting other attorneys. I love meeting other people who are thinking about using their law degree in different and unique ways. So I would encourage people to reach out if they're so inclined.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. I really appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.